Hi, this is Gil Robles again, and what you're looking at is a quick sketch I did for an intended illustration. This is the color sketch, uh, just showing the color scheme, but it's a quick sketch for an illustration based on the Black Panther character in Marvel Comics. Um, but this is, after seeing the Black Panther movie, so this was a short time back, not too long ago, maybe about a month or two, where I took my family out to see this movie, and we all had a great deal of fun. It was a great movie. It was just like, for me, it was just like reading the comic book. It was that much fun. And so after a while, I said, gee, I want to do a illustration based on this for promotional purposes and just for me to have fun and to celebrate my seeing the movie. But so here it is, and also because a lot of times what I've been doing on my channel is portraits. I rarely do a figure, and I rarely do something that involves a concrete background and so forth. So I figured that it's high time I do something like that and include a painting where I would have a figure in a background, in a concrete background, something that's happening behind him. And since I'm doing this for myself, I'm pretty much doing it the way I would do an illustration. But since I'm not trying to please an art director, and I don't have to stick to what I do strictly, you're going to see there are going to be some changes to this as I go along. Because I felt like let me add something more to it. Like over here, I have the Black Panther, and I have the Panther statue that was there in Wakanda, and then I have some foliage and so forth, and just the sky and the moon. And while that's okay, I felt like it needed to say something more about the character and include Wakanda, include the cityscape and so forth. So as it develops, what I do is start broadening the concept, start thinking more of how I want this illustration to reflect more of the character, trying to say more in just this illustration, which is which is what I wanted to do. But so right here I'm just working on the figure, and what I do, if you've worked on digital illustration, then you would know that normally you would put the figure, you would put actually the different elements of the painting on different layers. And this is what I'm doing so that I can work on one layer and make whatever changes that I want to on that layer if that I felt like there's a need to make changes. And of course there's always going to be a need to make changes as you develop your painting. So here I'm developing the figure, and there's certain things I'm actually, this whole thing except for that Panther statue gave me trouble because it's something that I guess I tried to get kind of tight on this painting and not be too loose. So I was pushing for a little bit more than I normally do, and also trying to find ways where I add that the rim light, like the red that's reflecting the background. And since I'm doing this all out of my head and using very limited amount of reference, some for the costume and so forth, but I don't have reference for this figure, except for the fact that I took a mannequin, one of those little drawing mannequins, and posed it and took some photographs of it. But it wasn't perfect. I mean, it's not. It's like I have to piece everything together. I had that mannequin, but it doesn't have a Black Panther costume. Then I had to get references for the costume. Then I couldn't find exactly what I'm looking for as far as the statue of the Black Panther. So I had to find references of actual Black Panthers, find references that whatever reference I could from the movie with the statue and so forth. And so what I wound up doing was making a statue that is kind of different from what was in the movie. But when I look back at the comic books, every time there was a Black Panther statue, whether it was drawn by Kirby or it was drawn by someone else, it was always looked different. So this is my Black Panther statue. And then of course, there was tons of reference for the all this green stuff and the trees and the foliage and so forth. So I didn't have to worry about that. The thing that was difficult and most difficult for me were the buildings. I'm not one to, it's not my favorite thing to draw buildings. Unless it's, I don't know. I mean, I can get into just about anything. So unless the painting is specifically about that because I saw something in some building that interests me, it's more or less of a detail, but I realize that it's an important detail in terms of describing the character and giving some kind of background to the character. So when I got to the buildings and so forth, it got a little bit tricky for me. But this is a time before that, as I'm still building the image up, and I'm trying to figure out the Black Panther here. And you know what? I put that moon in there just for right now, but it wasn't what I had intended, and I didn't really like it. So eventually I did take that out. So anyway, this is like I said, this is a little bit different for me, a little bit challenging, because when I do my illustration work and I do have a figure and so forth, I work with a lot more reference. And if I need a figure to stand in there or so forth, I would either use myself or my kids or my family as reference models for the characters. Now, but none of us are this muscular. I may be a little bit muscular, but no, not at all. I'm not this muscular at all, and no one in my family is. So this is something that I had to totally rely on my memory, my memory and my imagination, and to include the kind of drawing and painting that you would see in the comic books, and try to mimic that in this. So it was one of the, being that that's the case, it's a big relief that I wasn't trying to go realistic as so much as I was trying to represent illustration using a comic book type style. And so here I am. I managed to get in these buildings and these mountains back there to represent more of the background of the character, as far as Wakanda and Africa, and putting some mountains up there and stuff like that, so you get some of the high tech and some of the natural world as well. And but this stuff does not come too easily for me, like I said. So it was a bit of a challenge to put this together. And I think if I'd have done it on paper, there's so many different ways to do this digitally, and there's so many different aids as far as a perspective, and which I didn't use any of. I was just winging it here because I felt like if I did that, then it would take a lot more time to develop this painting, and it was just something that I was doing for fun. I know it seems maybe seems pretty ambitious, but actually, if I were doing an illustration to show an art director, I guess I would have relied less on my imagination and less on my memory, and more on getting, taking some time to get more specific as far as the reference is concerned. But like I said, just wanting to have fun with this, and I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it as much as I enjoyed watching that film, which is a good thing, because doing this illustration was like an extension of that. So, but anyway, like I said, having a hard time with these buildings, and I think that becomes obvious, especially in the first part of this, as I kept changing my mind, trying to figure out what I was doing. And but one of the things is that in order to make it seem like it belonged in this illustration, these buildings belonged in this illustration, I started looking at whatever I could as far as stills as the buildings that were used in the movie, as well as looking at some structures that look like African buildings and stuff like that, or African, they're iconic as far as looking African. Then, of course, there are areas that are modernized, and then there's Wakanda, which is like super, I guess, futuristic or whatever. It was totally different. So I'm trying to make it look as real as I can, and also trying to make buildings that were in a style that kind of said or seemed like they belonged in that part of the world. And of course, not trying to be stereotypical or anything like that in developing these buildings, and because a lot of the country, there's a lot of these areas that are as developed as any country in any other part of the world, and there's also parts that are that seems like time stands still. So as far as I know, no, I could be wrong. This is just my thinking in terms of how I developed this image, and how I tried to think of the concept of making these buildings look like they belong where they do. So you can see I went through a lot of changes because I looked at a lot of references for buildings, and in some cases I wanted to make it a very modern looking building. In other cases I wanted to make sure that when I make the buildings even further back that belong to Wakanda, that they look like, because they look like they belong on a science fiction set. Like there's no building in the world that looks like those buildings. They're very advanced and very different. So so they actually look like in some ways they look like they belong on the set of a Star Wars film. But in the context of the movie, it made sense. So these buildings went through a lot of different changes, and like this illustration went through a lot of different changes in order to get it to feel right. And you know what? This painting I did was over the course of several days, and it didn't come easily. But even if it didn't come easily, it was a ton of fun to do. I like doing to me, what was fun to do was a lot of the leaves, the greenery, the mountains, and things like that. I enjoy doing those things. But that's it. This is like I said, this was different for me. This was not something that I usually do on this channel. And you know, it would be great if you give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you thought about this illustration, which is a little bit more than I normally do. And I'm wondering if I should do a video that goes into detail about how to build up an illustration like this, rather than doing a speed painting, if anybody would be interested in something like that. But before I invest the time in it, I would love to hear what anybody else has to say. So please leave me your comments. If this was too long, if you needed me to be more descriptive about my methods and so forth, and maybe I'll do something. Maybe I'll do something on another site regarding that, and make it public. That's it. Leave your comments. Share the video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.